When we look at the community south of the George Washington Bridge, we see a place from a different time. The streets wind, buildings throw shade, and their cavernous lobbies ring hollow as they always have, echoing the sounds of apartment doors slamming. The children of yesteryear have gone off into distant places. The footprints of the immigrant German Jews are long faded, and exist only in the mind's eye. Who walked here? Who played here? Who prayed here? A generation of immigrants found the proximity to rivers and parks something like the Germany they had left, or had left them, and they began life anew. Storekeepers, house painters, refrigerator repairmen, seamstresses, and delicatessen workers, with a zest for life and a sense of community, quickly established community clubs revolving around social life, and with the influx of more immigrants, neighborly assistance, which they called self-help. Two such organizations were the One World Society and the Prospect Unity Club. While they offered socializing and assistance, these organizations were most famously associated with the sporting clubs that had soccer leagues running through the 1950s. German was spoken in the streets, though sometimes catching the ire of the American ear, and at cafes here and across the bridge in Fort Lee. Riverside Drive was alive with Jewish families out for a stroll on a Shabbos afternoon, and Sunday evening families would stroll Broadway for some pastries and vusht. It was the golden age of Washington Heights. Henry Shotland was born near Warsaw, Poland in 1884. His family relocated to the small rural town of Burgsalach in Bavaria, looking for a better life. The father, a Talmudic scholar, sent young Henry to the Hebrew grade school at Hochberg, and then to its sister institution, the Würzburg Teachers Seminary, where he excelled in music. Henry became a Lehrer in the town of Rudesheim-Pfalz, where he met his wife Eugenia. He went on to serve in World War I, earning the Iron Cross, and from 1921 until 1938 he was known as Lehrer Shotland of Frankenthal. Upon arriving in the United States, some of his old students and congregants asked him to lead a synagogue. Henry returned to yeshiva to receive rabbinic ordination, as he formed the congregation Tikva Chadasha, Hebrew for a new hope. Henry and his sons could harmonize beautifully and would bring a special nuance to the prayers and celebrations at the shul. Rabbi Shotland felt that the members should support the foundling state of Israel and not build large edifices in New York. And so, for many years, the shul occupied the headquarters of the Prospect Unity Club on Broadway and 158th Street. Rabbi Henry M. Shotland died suddenly at the age of 73 in 1957. The shul held out another 10 years until it needed to merge into the nearby Ahavas Torah. The congregation Avos Torah had many of the same trappings as the smaller shul Tikva Chadasha. The nusach, or style of cantation, of Jews from the Nuremberg area of Middle Franconia, and the coziness of a small shul, support for the State of Israel and community events like the yearly bazaar and shiurim and Shabbos. Avos Torah also had a proper mechitza and a Hebrew school. The shul was created with the sweat and tears of Max Oppenheimer. a cigar maker from Mannheim who arrived in September of 1938. Leaving behind factories and buildings in Germany, he began a small prayer group that offered free lessons in English language to promote immigrant survival. Together with his wife Alice and several families, they arranged clothing drives, support and direction to community organizations. They also had the fortitude to begin a new business by developing their synagogue bulletin into a full-fledged local newspaper that had circulation of close to 7,000 at one point. The Jewish Way covered the Holocaust, the war effort, and Israel, among other news. But unlike the Aufbau, it covered local affairs too, and had a better feel for religion, with regular articles by Samuel Belkin and local rabbinics and academics. Publication ran from 1940 to 1965. In 1940, while renting space from the American Shul Washington Heights congregation, they hired a recent arrival from Germany as their rabbi, the Reverend Hermann Lieber.
They said, "I'm available, you need someone, here I am." And they auditioned him, and at the end they hired him at $5 a week for doing all the things that either a cantor does alone, or a rabbi does alone, or a teacher does alone. He did all these things for $5 a week.
Hermann Lieber was born in Nuremberg in 1901 and held positions as cantor and Hebrew teacher in Zurich and Hamburg before the war. Shortly after Kristallnacht, after weeks of hiding in hospitals and cemeteries, Hermann Lieber, his wife, and 2 daughters secured safe passage to the United States.
Started off at 2024 Amsterdam Avenue, but he used to tell stories how he used to stand at the corner near the subway station and chop Jews for minyan. During the week, yeah.
Now, sharing space with another congregation wasn't working, and the new shul was built on 161st Street near Amsterdam Avenue. By 1950, the shul had absorbed close to 400 families and were able to purchase a retired movie theater on Fort Washington Avenue. No sooner the work was completed, Mr. Oppenheimer passed away from exhaustion. Rabbi Lieber, like Rabbi Shotland, was a Würzburg Seminary graduate. He was a Hebrew teacher, a consummate musician, a choir leader, composer, and a flock leader for the German Jews, a community of people who invested the greatest amount of reverence and confidence in their leaders. Rabbi Lieber, also known as Chazan Lieber, was responsible for arranging music and training choirs in his shul, as well as Shari Tikva and Breuer's shuls. Besides arranging the music, he conducted rehearsals and concerts. His influence in the neighborhood, though, was mostly in the area around his shul, as young immigrants and survivors poured in.
The war broke out, and people started to get married. And we were quite busy with weddings. Everybody wanted to get married quickly. Most of them were in our house, in our apartment. There was room for about 20-25 people, and we set up chairs. And we had a chuppah. A chuppah, that's the canopy, the wedding canopy, where the young people stand under and the rabbi gives the blessings and so on. And I made a sweet table in the dining room. Nobody expected to get rich on a wedding, and many of these people didn't have their parents here. And the young people who came here alone, you know, they didn't have the parents. There were times that we had 3 weddings on a Saturday night or 4 weddings on a Sunday afternoon. There were lots of empty apartments. And with permission of the landlord, we set up sweet tables on the 2nd floor, the 3rd, 4th floor. The wedding at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, 2nd floor was the reception, and so on. But that was a way of making a living.
In those days, you didn't have all the amenities for the chagim, like getting lulavim and stuff. So I remember my parents used to sell lulavim nesrogim and for Pesach matzahs and wine, and we used to be the delivery kids. So there's Leibedik. So my father was everything. The Rav, Chazan, Baal Koreh, everything. Shir giver, everything. My father was a trained musician. He could read notes like you and I read a book. And he loved opera and classical music, and I grew up hearing classical music all the time.
In 1959, after a disagreement with his congregation, he retired to private life. During this time, he recorded a record in memory of the city of Hamburg, with some of the best German chazanas recorded in the day. It was a brisk morning on March 14th of 1965 as Torah scrolls were marched through the streets between the Old Tikva Chadasha and Ahavas Torah. The merger of these two communities meant the consolidation of people and resources, and it told the story of the shift in demographics as the young generation moved out or shifted uptown to the 180s.